The first thing I want to talk about is naming our non-negotiables. Those of you in my class will know that I do an exercise where I ask my students, I walk into class and I say, what's your non-negotiable? And this is not an easy experiment. Very few of my students jump right in with their non-negotiables because it's a tough question, right? It asks for purity, right? It asks for personal stuff. There are all sorts of reasons why people hesitate, in part because I don't think many of them have been asked that by anyone. And so I ask them that, and I hold them there, and I stare at them, right, until they give me an answer. Because I know they have an answer. We all have an answer if we're pressed enough. And I ask them, what is your non-negotiable? And then I ask them a series of questions about when they've defended those things, when they've stood up for them, when they've been willing to lose something in order to do that. And then I ask them, when have you relinquished those non-negotiables? When have you negotiated the non-negotiable away? And in the midst of this exercise, what happens is that the students begin to identify the things that they cherish, the things that they hold most dear, the things that they value at their core. And what also happens in this exercise is that they start to tell stories about where those values come from. And they start to talk about their mom and their dad and their grandparents and their work environment and their bullying as children and the way that they came up in the world. And so you start to hear not only identification of values, the bedrock things that we cherish, but we also start to hear a little bit more about the deep stories that are embedded in these remarkable young folks. The law professor, critical race theorist, novelist, he also contains multitudes, Stephen Carter from Yale University, has a book that he's written about integrity. And in the book, he describes a kind of three-step process for arriving at integrity. And he reminds us all that integrity comes from the same root as integer. An integer is a whole number. Integrity is a whole person. And he gives us a three-step process to becoming a person, more of a person of integrity, or a person of more integrity. He says, first we have to discern. We have to discern what we think to be right or wrong through a process of moral reflection. We have to reflect morally on what we believe to be right and wrong. Then the second step is to be able to figure out how do we walk the walk based on that. How do we develop the capacity to act in the world according to what we've discerned is right and wrong for us. And that's what he calls moral steadfastness or moral resilience. And then the third stage, and this is great for a communications class, he talks about the third place is of moral courage, the ability to talk about the things you've discerned and the ways that you act in the world, to be able to do what moral philosophers call moral articulacy, to be able to articulate the values that produce our morality. And we get into lots of conversations about upstanders and bystanders, when we step up and defend people or stand up for the truth or what we believe to be right, or when we remain silent, and what are the consequences of those things. And so this arts of communication class becomes a little bit of a moral philosophy class, becomes a little bit of a history class, becomes a little bit of a therapy session, right? But it also becomes a kind of political organizing location, because students start to understand that values are indeed what make us tick and what help us to act. And what I push them to do is to try to come to more of a definition, their definition of what this value means. So a lot of them say, I value family, or I value freedom, right? And I said, well, what does family, what does freedom mean to you? Place it in context, give it a root, give it a place to grow, make it your own. And so we do that process, and naming our non-negotiables is an important step to figuring out what our values are.